Are you ready?
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that kind of acts as an arm of the newsletter of the Parishscope for St. John San Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the creative worship director at Our Savior in Washington.
Well, all right. It's been a hot minute. It's been a long while.
It has.
It's one of those things where and I know for you it's pretty much the same probably, but like for me it's like on the one hand, you have so much stuff going at you, like getting ready for confirmation, and in my case, a wedding, even, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's like it hits, and at first you're like, okay, I'm relieved, but then it's like all that stuff that you put off forever and ever. All of a sudden, here it comes.
Yeah.
So, like right after the wedding, I found myself actually busier than I've been in a long time, and I know with you guys, summer plans and everything, and it's just like, oh man.
Yeah.
So we have not been that consistent. It's been a good 3 weeks, I'd say at least. If not 4, since we've last had one. And if I remember correctly, we might not have one next week. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll be out of town next week, so I won't be able to.
Oh man, it's the worst.
I know.
But no, we'll see what we can do with that front. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I completely understand. It's busy, but that's okay. But we're here today. We're here tonight, and boy, do we got it all. I shouldn't say that. We really don't. We have a lot of things, but I don't know if we have it all. So anyway, so yeah, no, honestly, and this was one of those things. Like we were just talking right before I started, and I'll be honest, I didn't really have a news story. I was kind of like thinking through, like, oh, maybe I should talk about like the Elon Musk Donald Trump fight, and I was like, that seems pretty lame to me. It honestly, like, I already hate getting into politics, but it just strikes me like two teenagers like fighting. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, there's not much to say.
Yeah.
It's like it's just
no, you did it. It's your fault. No, Yeah. and it's like I don't know. Like I don't even know how to go about starting with that conversation. But But then you brought to my attention that one of the big news headlines is the lead singer or one of the singers of Newsboys, one Michael Tate, who kind of abruptly left Newsboys, was a part of DC Talk back in the day.
Yep.
For those of you that really remember back in the day. But anyway, so he abruptly left the band, and now all of a sudden there's all these allegations coming out about him.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems that there's some articles and interviews from the rest of the members of the Newsboys who have said that when he was leaving, he basically fessed up to everything, told them everything he had been doing, and so they're pretty. The band is pretty big right now about, or I don't know if big is the right word. They're very forthcoming about saying, hey, if something has happened to you, you should feel safe to come out and tell people. They're being very, very supportive on the front of the people that were affected, and that they want to make sure those people know that they can come forward and they should come forward. So it's such a crazy situation. I can't imagine. I mean, I think if I remember right, I think he was in the band for like 15 years or something like that.
And then he was like in DC. Yeah, and then he was in DC Talk before that.
Yeah, and so he's been touring since he was like basically a teenager.
Yeah,
and he's really been involved in the music industry for a long time. And I mean, just being someone, like, since I worked at a concert venue, I really got to see that behind the scenes of a lot of these kind of acts. I mean, bands that their whole thing, we had bands there that their whole gimmick was like they're recovering alcoholics and now they're all cleaned up and they're, all this stuff. And they come in, the first thing they do is go take shots. And they're just like, well, that's all just kind of, and they'll just tell you like, oh, that's just kind of like for the news, just to kind of get things off our back or something happens. So we had to tell people we're recovering alcoholics. And so there's so many things that it's sad to hear, but it's the truth that there's so many things that the public is told, and it's just a lie completely. And
Yeah,
especially when you live on a bus, you go city to city, you know, a lot of those guys, they don't have a lot of care for who they're talking to or who they're affecting. So they just kind of do whatever they want because what's it really matter? You know,
yeah,
they're going to be 200 miles away in 24 hours anyway. So,
yeah,
and, uh, and I, not to, I hate to say, but even like I've heard, because I have friends who've worked at the Civic Center in Peoria, and I've heard that there's been a lot of times where they absolutely dread Winter Jam because they say there's the bands are some of the most rude people, which is really sad to hear because it's
it
a
is.
Christian festival and
It is.
they
It
go,
is.
it's just horrible. The backstage in those concerts are worse than any other, and it's like that's terrible to hear, but
Yeah.
unfortunately. But back to kind of Michael Tate, it's he's yeah, there's some allegations that he had been doing some stuff that he should not be doing, some drug use, and then some um, things with potential young men, and
Yep. Yep.
uh,
Yep.
it's
And
just
I hate to say this, but like, as you brought this to my attention, I looked it up, and as of today, all those things are true. He's admitted to them.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
not, which I
He's
guess that's one thing to say is that he's not denying it, I guess,
No, he's
but
not. He's like in a rehab facility now. Says he wants to take this slow and private, kind of thing.
yeah,
And and again, yeah, I do applaud him for that. At least he didn't like deny it and try to run some other screen. Like he seems to be owning it. And and yeah, you're right. Like if the other band members were like, yeah, if something bad happened to you, you can come forward. Like, again, I can applaud that. Like, there's reactions to sin, and there's right reactions and there's wrong reactions,
yeah,
and this seems to be, at least seems to be on the outside. And again, kind of like to your point, like we don't necessarily know what the rest of this looks like. We
yeah,
can't see behind the scenes. We can only see, what the news articles and everything else say. But from the outside looking in, it seems to be like they're trying to handle this in the correct way. And
yeah.
that's actually in a way kind of refreshing, you
It
know.
is a little bit, yeah. I mean,
So
it's and I think it kind of brings uh, a difficult discussion for like me on my end, since this is a music kind of situation. It's hard because you sit there and think like one of the songs we've done a lot. I mean, and I know we did it at St. John's a lot, was the song "We Believe," which was a Newsboys song
yeah,
sung by Michael Tate when he was in the Newsboys. And you just, now it's like you kind of look at it and you go, should we sing that anymore? It's like, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. It's not that the message is wrong anymore, but
yeah,
it's just that there's a weird feeling to sit there and go like, this guy was singing this every night while he was doing terrible things and just
yeah.
didn't really seem to care at the time. Um, it's like, I don't know, it kind of gives you that. I mean, I guess that's a discussion you hear all the time, is like when some celebrity does something, it's like, do you go see their movies anymore, or do you listen to their music anymore, or do you stop listening to it, like
Honestly, for me, I think what it would really come down to is this. I think a lot of this really does have to do with how does he react. And I'll be honest, like look, let's go back to, what is it, a couple years ago with the Will Smith thing.
yeah,
Like, right, Will Smith walks up on stage and just slaps Kid Rock, not Kid Rock,
or Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
Kid Rock, yeah.
Yeah, Kid Rock and him would be
that'd
tussling.
be that'd be a whole different experience or
That,
story.
that would be a fight now. But I mean, he slaps Chris Rock, and then
Yeah,
like his apology is like a half-hearted thing.
yeah,
He's full of tears and everything else, but he really doesn't apologize to Chris Rock.
he
He
just kind of
apologizes.
says,
Yeah, he
yeah,
apologizes to like people for having to witness it and this, that. Like he really doesn't say sorry to Chris Rock, and it's like, honestly, like after that, like I mean, I'll still watch a Will Smith movie, but I struggle with that one a little bit.
yeah.
Um,
I gotta be
Whereas this
honest.
one, yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I'll be honest, I haven't watched a Will Smith movie since. I mean, and it's not that I'm like doing anything to not go see it. It's just that if I see a preview for a movie and he's in it, I just kind of don't really want to see it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of because of the way he went about it. And he didn't really apologize. He kind of halfway apologized. And then, I know they came out with a movie um, later on, like that he was in later on, and they were doing this big thing how like he was just going to normal small town theaters and hanging out with people. It's like, yeah, because he needs to build his reputation back up, you
Yeah.
know. And to me, it's just like it's just a big PR move to try
Oh,
to
for
make him
sure it
look
is.
like he's such a great guy. And it's like, but they're not mentioning the fact that he had just slapped Chris Rock across the face like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And it's just that I don't know, like to me that made me more sick of it because
Hmm.
they were just trying so hard to not do anything about it. And I think he went on like Hot Ones, that the YouTube interview show where they eat hot wings, and they never
Oh,
brought
right.
it up or anything, which they always try to be nice, but it's kind of like, you know,
It's got an
you could
elephant
have,
in this room, you know?
yeah, and it's like I get it. He probably said they don't want to talk about it, but it's also like, you did something pretty ridiculous, and we're all just going to pretend like it didn't. We're just going to pretend like nothing happened. It's just weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
not to get on the whole Will
Well, but I
Smith
mean,
train.
I do think though that like, we're comparing like two different scenarios, but like, we could argue that Michael Tate's, sins in this regard were much more egregious from a societal standpoint.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely.
at the same time, I think we're more likely to forgive him because we see like real repentance. Like, his bandmates are telling everybody to come forward if you've been like, harassed or molested basically. And even Tate's like going, yeah, I did this. This is an awful thing, but I did it. It's like he's
Yeah,
not he's not, saying like, well, I'm sorry you guys found that out. You know?
yeah. I'm sorry you all had to hear this. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. He's not giving some half-hearted thing. And it's like, but there is a difference. Like, so you're able to look at Michael Tate and give a little bit of mercy. I think, whenever I talk to people, a lot of times I talk to them about like sin, of course. And being a pastor, you do that. And
yeah.
and it just happens to be a topic that we talk about from time to time. Um
Right.
but like, like seriously though, like, when we talk about sin, I a lot of times I talk about, the two alcoholics, right? Like let's say you have two alcoholics. One knows he's an alcoholic, and the other one doesn't admit that he's an alcoholic. Deep down, he
Yeah,
probably does, but he doesn't admit it. And it's like the question is like, well, okay, which one should go to the Lord's Supper? Which one should be able to come to the altar? And I go, well, look, you got the guy that's going to sin, doesn't care. He's going to keep on doing it, and whatever. Like that guy should not be up there. He should not be on the altar of the Lord. He needs to repent of his sins. But the alcoholic that's struggling with it, the one that knows that it's wrong, that knows that he shouldn't do it, but he also knows that he's weak. And so maybe later tonight or maybe whenever it happens to be, he's going to, dare I say, fall again. And he knows that he's probably going to fall. He's probably going to end up drinking alcohol. He doesn't like that part of himself, but it's still something that he's going to do. That guy should be up at the altar. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
there's a difference between struggling with your sin and just being blatant and just being
Mhm.
impenitent, as we call it. But to not repent, to just say I don't really care. And
Yeah,
and again, those are two different things. But that's kind of what we're seeing here, right? Like in Will Smith's instance, it's like he wants to do this half-hearted apology and then like rebuild his reputation, whereas this Tate guy, and again, I don't really know what's going on. I'm only reading news articles.
yeah,
So if like in 2 days from now we find out something else, like that might change everything. But as of right now, it just seems like he's really trying to do the right thing, stepping away from it and doing all that. And so I think that's a good approach. I think it's a correct approach. And I
yeah,
think whenever he comes back, if he comes back, I think it'll be kind of a welcome thing.
yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, yeah, as people come forward, we'll see what you know. We'll see if it's something that people can really let go of or not.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we're called to forgive and forget, sort of thing, right? I mean, is
Yeah.
that is that that is that okay? I just said that, but then a part of my brain just said, "Is that actually in the Bible, or is that just something I've heard enough that I assume that's in the Bible?" Is forgive and forget that's an actual
Well,
verse?
so forgive and forget, like that actual phrase, I do not believe that's actually in scripture.
Okay,
But
that's what I was just gonna. Yeah.
this is what I'll say. Like whenever we talk about God's forgiveness, so first of all, the word forgiveness actually means to let go.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it means. It means to let it go.
Oh,
Um, and God says that He's going to separate sin as far as the east is from the west, right? Like so, that implies at least some aspect of, He's going to like forget the sin. He's not going to hold on to it anymore.
yeah.
Um, now that being said, and again, He also calls us to a life of forgiveness. And in the same front, He kind of says, hey, like even if your brother sins against you not just 7 times, but 77 times. You know, um, you need to forgive him. You need to let it go,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really hard. Now that
Yeah.
now that being said, with that, like having your sins separated from you, I don't know how possible it is to actually just forget. Now you can let it go. You can you
Mm-hmm.
can move on. You can move past it.
Yeah.
You know, even some sins you can even laugh about later and go like that was ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
but so you can be separated from them, but how much is actually forgotten, at least by people and human beings, that I cannot answer.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not perfect, so even though we want to forgive, and it's sometimes it can be hard to really let go of certain things.
Oh, for sure it is. For
Yeah.
sure, it is so hard. It is absolutely so hard, and the worst part about it is and I've seen this happen a few times, and the older I get, the more I am convinced that this is absolutely true. That the people that struggle the most to let go end up becoming the very villain that they're against. And
Yeah.
honest to God, I have no idea how this works out this way, but it seems to all the time. The person that somebody gets angry at them and yells at them or whatever, the person that can't let go of that ends up becoming an angry person, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and it and it just seems so wild to me because it's like, well, you were against them because they were angry, and now you're really angry, and
Yeah.
and it's and you just see this kind of thing happen all the time, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, I feel like there's sort of in our society there is encouragement to be upset, and I see this in a lot of professions, like certain professions that people just seem to complain all the time, and it just seems like, as they say, misery loves company, and
Yeah,
so they just people want to encourage, like they encourage each other to be miserable, and they encourage each other to have a horrible attitude towards their job or towards whatever it is.
yeah,
Or you get the people who maybe they've been wronged in a relationship, and now all of a sudden they want all their friends to get, break up with their, girlfriends or whatever,
yeah,
because they're miserable, and oh, you can't trust anyone, man. And so they're trying to sort of sow that seed in people to be miserable with them, you know.
yeah, yeah. And again, I don't even know how else to describe it. It's a fascinating thing because on the one hand, you want people to feel emotions. You really do. And so,
Yeah.
like, if somebody is angry, you want them to kind of experience that anger. But then the idea is that once you've experienced it, you should be able to let it go. That's the whole point of venting, right?
Yeah.
You vent and you kind of let the steam out, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But then the
I,
idea is that you got to let go of it. You can't keep holding on to it. Like once it's vented, it's gone. It should be no more.
so as in theology, what is sort of I'm sure they didn't have a Hebrew word for venting, but I mean, maybe they did, but I wonder, because I think that's something that I probably, there are definitely people, some people like to use the phrase Bible thumpers, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But like, there are definitely people out there who, like, when I was in high school, if you were upset about something and you said anything, there would be that person who's like, hey man, we don't want to talk bad about anybody. It's like, well, I'm not trying to talk bad. I'm just like trying to explain my frustration. And they're like, no, man, no, let's, don't be frustrated. Everything's great. And like, they won't let you vent.
Yeah.
because they don't want any negativity. Which again, now I feel like I'm kind of on the flip side because it's like misery loves company, but then there's also the side of like that in between, where or finding the in between of like you kind of have to get stuff off your chest a little bit, but what's too far, and what's is there anything theologically that kind of says like, yeah, you can vent and get it off your chest, or is that you
Well,
know
I'll be frank. I don't know what just happened. Casey has left the building, but it looks like he's back. So
can you hear me?
there's that. I was
Can you
just,
hear me?
I was just filling the void because you disappeared. So
Oh, I was talking and I didn't know I didn't know I was gone.
you did you were like right in the middle of it, and all of a sudden you were just gone. I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay.
sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know. Basically, I was just asking if theologically, if there is anything in the Bible that says like you're allowed to vent and get it out, but then you need to like forgive them.
So there's actually quite a bit of conversation over this. I know a Dr. Jeffrey Gibbs at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. He spends a good deal of time talking about this because there is such a thing as righteous anger, and God gets angry. You know, he gets angry with sin. He gets angry with impenitence. Um, and so there is like this big question: like, is there such a thing in the Christian life as righteous anger? Now, I will be honest, like Dr. Gibbs seems to fall on the side that there is not, you know, but I will say this, and this is kind of, my own, I guess I'd say personal stance maybe on the issue is that, again, first of all, like as Christians, I think we need to at least be open to the idea that we shouldn't be happy and content with a sinful world with sin creeps in. And so I would say I don't know if we should necessarily be happy and content. We're not supposed to just be, happy-go-lucky, you know, folks per se. We live in a real world, and the real world is filled with sin, and we should not like sin. And now that being said, we got to be careful that we don't break the eighth commandment. The eighth commandment says, bear no false witness against your neighbor, and at least a part of that commandment is that we're not supposed to we're supposed to try to explain things to the best of our ability in the best possible way. Now, that being said, that is incredibly challenging to do. When somebody has wronged you or something else. But I would also say, like, if you're willing to do, at least be able to say, I would say this in front of that person, the person has irritated me, but I would be open to talking to that person about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also say, again, kind of along these lines, like, I think it is important as human beings to realize, like, we are created by our creator with emotions. We have them. Um, and so when we try to block them, when we try to hide them, when we try to pretend that they're not real or they don't exist, that doesn't really work. So when
Mm-hmm.
somebody angers us, well, we have anger and we need to do something about that. And part of that is to vent that anger because sometimes we can't think straight until we are able to do that. And once we can think straight, then we can start to say, well, maybe he meant to do this or maybe he meant to do that. I can't remember, maybe I'm misconstruing this in my head. It was just, and then we can kind of calm down and say, well, maybe it was just really frustrating for me in the moment. Um, we're allowed to kind of do that, but we have to kind of experience the fact that that some form of an injustice has been done. Um, Even if later we find out that the injustice wasn't done quite the way we wanted it to, and we need to be open to that as well. But I do think it's important that as human beings created by God to have emotions, that we actually have them and we don't try to hide them or pretend they don't exist.
Hmm. That I've never thought about this honestly till right now. That you brought up, you shall not bear false witness, and
Yeah,
but it doesn't say necessarily. I mean, it's talking about spreading lies or a false testimony,
yeah,
but it's not saying you shall not bear false witness and you cannot be angry at them.
yeah.
It's like, and I don't know. That's interesting. I've just never thought about that because I think I don't know if I got cut off at this part, but I think I grew up with a lot of people who were very like, you can't be angry, happy faces,
Yeah.
no, it was always like you have to be happy all the time because that's what a Christian is to be happy.
Yeah.
And it always felt, there was times for me that it felt very fake. Like, well, I'm not happy though.
Yeah.
I'm mad at this person, and because they did something that really hurt my feelings or whatever. But then someone, I have someone who's like, well, but you can't be mad at them, and it's like, but there's nothing that says you can't be upset.
Yeah.
Like, and so that's interesting because I've never thought about that, and I don't know where that. I feel like that's maybe something that doesn't get talked about much enough because
Yeah.
I feel like it was always like, don't be angry, just suppress that, and then forgive them.
See, and again, this is one of those things. Like it's, I would say it's modern day, but I don't even think it's modern anymore. A lot of modern Christians aren't necessarily like this, but like the reality is like we have a whole generation or two that were like basically taught that, yeah, you have to be happy all the time, you got to be nice, and no matter what happens, like, you can't ever be mad at God, for instance. And like that's a total
Mm,
lie. Like again, I I cannot tell you how many people that I have talked to over the years, and a lot of times, whenever you're talking to these people, they're going to be like, "Hey, look, I feel very angry at God, and I just don't think that that's right." And it's like, I'm like, "Look, you can be angry with God. He's a big boy. He can take care of himself. Like
yeah.
you don't have to. You're not going to hurt his feelings, right? Like
Hmm.
like he's God, and he's the God of all there is, was, and ever shall be. Like you can be angry with him as long as you do not deny who he is, and as long
Yeah.
as you do not deny what he has done for you. Like
Hmm.
I mean, look, your kids at some point in time are going to be upset at a decision you make, and there's no possible way that you can explain that decision to them. It is for the best. It is for their benefit. And in the end, if they really, really thought about it, they would thank you for it. But they're not going to thank you right then, because right then it just strikes them as an injustice. It's terrible. It's awful. It's the worst.
Yeah.
You know. And the same thing goes for us. Like, right, we live in a very sinful world, and God does what He wills, and He makes the best out of a world that is filled with sin and awfulness. And sometimes that awfulness is going to come to our doorstep. And get this, sometimes God is the one that's going to put it there. Now, He's not going to create it. He doesn't create evil. Um, He doesn't tempt us or lead us astray. But there are some times that we create our own evil, and He allows it on our doorstep.
Hmm.
Um, and and again, we don't know His plans, so we can't necessarily see the reason or the rationale for why it's on our doorstep. We just know it is.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a sinful world. He didn't create the sin, but he's going to use everything of this world to create and craft the best possible outcome. And
Hmm.
sometimes we don't like that. you know
Yeah.
when we look, I get it. We can get into all kinds of deep topics with this, and I know we've crossed some of the threshold of this before, and it is true. But it's like, you think about, you think about like imagine there's like some 21-year-old, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
imagine you're God up in heaven, you're looking down and you're seeing this 21-year-old, and tomorrow this 21-year-old is going to run into a guy that's going to basically, invite him over to some other place. He's going to end up cooked on drugs, and before you know it, he's going to lose his faith, and he's going to die, and he's going to burn for all of eternity. Um, and you're God, so you can kill that 21-year-old today. And you go,
Mhm.
okay, well, but I would tell you, don't ever, ever, ever use this example when you're talking to a family of a 21-year-old that just died, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like they will not appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's not the time to talk about this kind of thing. But at the same time, like, you can see it. Like, once you put it from that perspective, like given this one little example with this little things, like you can begin to see it. You can go, okay, yeah, I can see why God would maybe kill that 21-year-old. It would be a tragedy for the family that has to live in that moment, but
Mhm.
it would be absolutely wonderful in terms of eternity.
Yeah.
Um, Now expand that, expand that to you know 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, a million people, a billion people, and imagine all the moving parts and all the gears and all the elements that have to be in place just for one or two things to happen. It's like, and God is a master and in control of all of that. So yeah, there's all kinds of little things that are going on in our lives that we don't maybe fully grasp, but yet God is still in control because he is God. But that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that we're not going to have times when we're not irritated with him. And that's why
Yeah.
we can turn to the impreccable Psalms of King David, where King David like screams out and he goes, "Why, God? Why'd you do this?" He's
Yeah.
angry, you know?
Yeah. Gosh, this is so weird. I'm amazed. I guess I feel like, I'm 34 years old, and I guess my whole life I felt like being mad is like a sin, you
Oh yeah.
know? It's so weird that I mean, it, uh, it completely changes so much about like, even just like in a relationship of like not being, if someone's upset, it's like, that's okay if they're upset,
Yeah.
because sometimes we get upset, and not just taking it as like, well, I don't know. I'm like, it would be such a different world if just anger was not viewed as just this like faux pas. You can't be angry ever. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of, I feel like a whole different mindset has now opened up in my head. Um, with that, because yeah, you're right. I mean, there are times in the Bible where people are mad at God, and
Yeah.
I guess I don't know why I never really thought about it. But
Yeah. And again,
very
it's
interesting.
okay. Now, even
Yeah.
King David, when he gets mad at God, he always kind of like wraps up his psalm, or it comes back around to like, but you are God and I am not. And it's kind of like, he kind of comes back around to the whole idea that yes, he is still God Almighty.
Yeah.
Like I don't like what you're doing right now, but you're still God and I'm not. So, you know,
Hmm.
and again, that's an appropriate and good Christian response. We can look at an injustice that's been done in our life and we can go, God, I don't understand this. I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't like what you're doing. But even in that regard, like realize like to say such a thing, you have to be open to the element of faith. You have to be, you can't say,
Hmm.
God, I don't like what you're doing if you don't believe in God, you know?
Yeah.
So
My head's exploding right now. So that's just crazy.
yeah. And again, this is like this is rampant and this has been rampant for a long, long time, but it's like, you see this too. This is one of the reasons that like whenever I do funerals or gravesides, I almost always talk about First Thessalonians 4. And there's a section of First Thessalonians 4. It begins at verse 13. And Paul is talking to a group of Thessalonians. And a lot of the Thessalonians, they believed at the time that death was going to be no more, right? Jesus was going to come real quick. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we converted to Christianity. Boom, Jesus is coming tomorrow. They didn't think anybody was going to die anymore. And so when people started to die, they had like a crisis of faith. And so
Wow.
Paul is like comforting them. And one of the things that he says is, brothers, we don't grieve as others do who have no hope. But what's interesting is Paul never says, oh, you don't grieve. No,
Yeah.
he just says he says you don't grieve like others do who have no hope. That is to say, you grieve as somebody who has hope.
Yeah.
You still grieve, you still experience that loss, you still experience that tragedy of relationship and the wages of sin, and you look at the awfulness of it all. But at the same time, you don't then turn around and go, oh well, everything is lost, it's hopeless. It's like, no, that's the Paul is but again, this is where you kind of come to like, you come to a funeral and people are like, well, we need to be happy, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you can try, but don't try to hide it if you're sad. It's okay. You know,
Yeah.
somebody passed away and that sucks.
Yeah. It does. It's yeah. I feel like that's something I've just always felt like I had to try to stay happy. Just like when you go in on Sunday, you got to be happy. If you're not, you're bringing the party down, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and
And
again,
he,
this is actually one of the complaints that a lot of times comes with like contemporary music, because contemporary music tends to be peppier, it tends to be happier, and a lot of people think like, a lot of people. This is one of the reasons that they really like it is like, hymns tend to be almost dirgy and
yeah,
a little bit more depressing, But one of the things that hymns do capture is the full range of emotion. Um,
right.
but I will also say, like a lot of the contemporary songs, like again, as time moves on and you get more and more contemporary songs, you're starting to get more of them that have more of a full range of emotion.
Yeah,
Whereas
that's
back in
funny.
like the '80s and '90s, it was
Oh
all about
yeah,
happy camp songs.
yeah. Because I would say that's funny when you said that. I kind of thought a lot of the contemporary stuff I know, I feel like is so depressing, and it's just like, and there's some songs I really really like, but there's some times where I feel like, man, it's like every song this week is just like everything's about drowning and struggling
Yeah,
and not being able to get through life. And it's like, you know, I mean, and I don't know, I guess I go back and forth with it because there's times where I'm just like, it doesn't always have to be depressing, but
yeah,
then, you know, and so sometimes I like some of the peppier stuff, but then whenever I go back and do like one of those songs that's a little sad, it's like you never know who in the congregation is going through something and they need that message, so um yeah, I mean, it definitely, things have changed a lot over
yeah,
the years. I mean, contemporary music has changed. I mean, when I was in high school, middle school, and played for church, all the songs were like Hillsong United songs, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it was a lot of, like, there was some pretty peppy stuff and all that, and but you just played like rock beats, and now there's like a whole new style of drumming that is like contemporary Christian drumming, and it's weird because that wasn't the way I grew up playing. And now it's like, oh, there's like a very specific sound, and there's, like certain equipment you need to
yeah,
have to pull off the contemporary Christian sound. And so it's kind of funny that that's become regulated in a way. Um, but
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's just, I guess it's good to have a mixture of both, peppy and happy, or happy and sad,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Well, and again, this is one of the reasons I love liturgical understanding, because you get to understand the ebbs and flows, not just of the seasons, but also of even within the service, where you can have a happy song and a sad song on the same length, but it just depends on where you put it in the service and
Yeah.
why it's there and what the words actually say.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it is. It's interesting. I know we're kind of going down a big music route today, but
Oh yeah,
um,
but it's good.
one of the songs that it's kind of on the radio right now, and one of the people at my church played it the other day, like, oh, I really like this song, and listening to it's a song called I Need a Little Church, and
Okay.
it was and the only thing is when I listen to it, I feel like I'm turning into an old man because I sound just like my parents, but I'm like, they didn't talk about God one time in this song. It's talking about struggling through the week, and then it's like, I need a little church right now. And it's like, well, you don't need church, you need God. I mean,
Yeah.
if not saying you don't need to go to church, but it's like, ch- God is what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what you need. And if unless you just want to go to like the rock concert that happens at a big massive church and that's what makes you happy,
Yeah.
but it's
Come
like,
on,
no, you
pep
need,
you up.
and so I just listened to the whole song and I thought, there's nothing in this. You could change this to to be about Buddhism or something,
Yeah.
or it's like, it really doesn't have anything to do with Christianity though.
But
It's
again,
just,
again, I will say this though, and this is kind of my big thing. Like there are times and places even for those songs, because I always tell people like one of everybody's favorite songs in the whole world is "Amazing Grace."
oh
And
yeah,
it's a,
yeah,
it's a
we've talked about
beautiful
that. Yeah.
song, but it's like it's not a real good Christian hymn. Now
Yeah.
it's I didn't say it was a bad hymn. It's not a bad hymn. It mentions God, I think, one time. It never mentions Jesus. It talks about grace, but it never really defines what it is.
Yeah.
Now, if you know the background of the story and all the stuff that went into that song, it is a very Christian song. But you got to
Yeah.
know that background beforehand, because
Hmm.
otherwise it's like it's a very kind of bland song that doesn't say a whole lot, you
Yeah.
know. But it's when you know that background that you understand the depth of the music, and that's great. And again, there's a time and place to sing Amazing Grace, and it is a great song. Um, but if we're only vetting songs based on their lyrics and based on those very specific criteria, then Amazing Grace would be thrown out yesterday.
Right. Well,
Well,
and
it,
it
it
is
is
interesting
interesting
because
because
there's a
there's a lot.
lot to put together or a lot to consider,
Oh, sure.
um, because sometimes there are songs that don't have a lot of depth to them, but man, people are singing it all week and they're thinking about it all week, and it's
Hmm.
stuck in their heads. And so I kind of I have to also view that like there's also a language in the music itself that can really do something for people, because some of the songs, my honestly my favorite songs, and I know that people like to, there's the the saying that there's 7-Eleven songs,
Hmm.
and
Absolutely.
it's same seven things 11 times,
Yeah.
and those are honestly like my favorite songs because they get stuck in my head and I'm singing them all week and I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it. And so and maybe they aren't as deep, but I would honestly argue that there's a lot of depth to some of those, even if it's a simple depth. Um,
Again, I always say
but
there's a time and place. There's
yeah,
there's a time and place. Like I don't want to make it sound like you should never do a 7-Eleven song. Like I think that would be wrong. But I will say though that like there for a while, like that's what contemporary worship was. It was
yeah,
just a series of 7-Eleven songs and maybe a little bit of scripture and prayer. And it's like, well, no, that's not right. Like there's some other stuff that's missing there. And there's also, I mean, again, it's one of those things like I don't want to discount contemporary worship, but I also think it's a shame, and I'll admit this, I think it's a shame whenever you have, kids growing up that have never heard any of the ancient hymnody. I think the ancient hymnody is quite beautiful and quite frankly has a lot to offer.
yeah,
Now, that doesn't mean that I think that they should all go to traditional worship and contemporary worship's the devil. I'm not saying that at all. But I think that
yeah.
that it's good to have an understanding of if nothing else, at least both sides, and create a certain sense and depth of music.
Hmm. Yeah, that's why I do like throwing in a little some hymns from time to time.
Oh, for sure.
Something, just because it really does. It just adds a lot to it.
Yeah.
Not to mention that's always the weeks where people come up to me and say like, the songs were so good this week. And it's like, that's because we sang "Be Thou My Vision"
Yeah.
at the end of some contemporary song. So
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they just, it makes them feel good. It's
Yeah.
like hits them in that way. So um, yeah, it's, I don't know. It's very interesting because um, I think like this one of the songs, maybe I've talked about this on here before, but one of my favorite songs is the song "Surrounded," and it's you basically just sing, um, this is how I fight my battles. This is how I
Oh, yeah.
fight my
Yeah.
battles.
Yeah. I know the
That
one.
one, and then the bridge is um, oh, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And you repeat it over and over and over. Those, like, you just repeat those. And honestly, every time I sing it, I sit there and I go, is this how I fight my battles? Is this how I actually do it? Or do I try to do it by myself? Because there's
Yeah.
a lot of times where I probably should have been praying and I wasn't. And then I think of it looks like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And I'm like, but am I actually paying attention to that? I just,
Yeah.
and it's kind of that thing where it's like you sing it so many times that you kind of start to think, well, am I really doing this? Or am I just singing this
Yeah.
song because it sounds good? And it always makes me self reflect,
Sure.
because it's just kind of pounding it into your head like over and over and over, and you have to start thinking to yourself and admitting to yourself whether you're actually doing it or not. So I don't know, it's interesting.
It is. It is.
But
So, all right.
i
Well, I don't know if we have time for your question.
I feel like I feel like our whole thing's been a pretty steady flow of I've had a few questions that you've kind of answered already, so I feel
Yeah.
good about that. So yeah, I think probably we can move on to the other segment.
All right. Well, are we ready? It's for our newest segment.
That's right.
And now, life and times of the saints. And I still don't have an exit. I just don't. I don't have an exit. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right. Many would say they performed a magic trick. Others would say it was a miracle. But whichever way you looked at it, they were drawing a crowd. It was the kind of thing that you would notice. 50 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, and so on. They drew a crowd. It must have felt immense, like you were part of something huge, and certainly you were. The crowds alone would have been huge. I'm not saying they had lights and a laser show, but had you been there, the one to see them, you might have expected it. Of course, you might have expected all kinds of things. A full-on stage, maybe. Those perfect teeth and image so often come with the megachurch preachers. You certainly would have expected to see people being healed and miracles being done. And while I don't have any photos, I'm pretty sure the leaders of this ragtag group didn't have perfect teeth or the perfect jawline. They did have healings. They did have miracles. And as much as we might want to suggest that it is that was bringing in the crowds, it really wasn't. It was something more, something bigger, something greater than that. It wasn't just the crowds, it was what they stood for, what and who they stood for. In the midst of all these crowds, and in the midst of all these people stood a man. Some say he was prominent in society, others think he wasn't. Because honestly, up until that fateful day, we don't know much about Joe. However, Joe was there. Joe was among the crowd, among the people. Joe was there, not as a leader, but as a follower. Of course, a follower of Jesus. This is Lives of the Saints, you know. However, also as a follower of, well, of them. Caught up in it all, Joe decided to sell some land. Land presumably he had inherited from his parents because, well, his type wasn't allowed to own land in the main country. But regardless of where he got it, Joe sold it. And he took the money and he gave it to, well, he gave it to them, the preachers, the people drawing a crowd. And on that fateful day, I wonder if Joel fully realized that he was doing something that would ultimately be one of the biggest shifts in his life, or not. It might seem like it was Joe caught up in the moment, something that later on he would be known for, but honestly, I think he knew. I say this because while he wasn't one of them, he was all the same. Joe might not have been a direct connection, so to speak, but yet he was there all the same. And quite frankly, as the story moves on, there can be no doubt that Joe had a very important role to play. Maybe that's why they changed his name. Maybe that is why we don't remember Joe as well. We don't remember him as Joe. Instead, we know him as Barnabas. We all know that Barnabas was with Paul, that he traveled with him. We all know about the fight and how Barnabas would eventually travel with John Mark. Yes, we all know the name Barnabas, but most of us don't remember the first time his name appears in Scripture. We don't remember Acts chapter 4, verse 36, where a Levite, a person who wasn't able to own land in Israel, sold a piece of land and laid the money at the feet of the disciples. A man who had a common name, the name of Joe or Joseph, but the apostles, they had another name. They called him Son of Encouragement, or Barnabas. He wasn't one of them. He wasn't one of the original 12 disciples, although some think he might have been part of the 72 and had heard Jesus preach. We don't know that for certain either. He wasn't one of them. And yet, in the end, he was. He might not have had the title of disciple, but he certainly carried the title of apostle, of someone who was sent, because go he did. And we even read about it through Acts. But now, well, now you know more of the story and the life of Saint Barnabas. So tomorrow, at least tomorrow for us, on June 11th, honor good old Saint Barnabas. He was with Paul and he was with John Mark, and oftentimes is overshadowed by them, which is why, whenever I looked it up earlier today, his drink of the day is a sidecar, because he was always kind of on the side. He was along with Paul or along with John Mark. Now, a sidecar, for those of you that don't know, and maybe those of you that are at least older than 21, is brandy, a little bit of triple sec, and a little bit of lemon juice. And for dinner, I looked this up too. That's right. I looked it all up today. Um, it is a side dish, right? Side dish. Risotto alla Milanese. And a dish that looks, as the description says, looks like encouragement because it looks yellow like the rising sun, which is encouraging. And he was called son of encouragement. That's what the name Barnabas means. So there you go. There's my Lives of the Saints. And I don't have exit music. I always forget. So
You just play the intro,
okay.
and then
There we go. And now, life and times of the saints
are done.
is done. The end.
Or I got to jump in sooner and say, and that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there you go. Anyway, yeah. So tomorrow is the celebration of Saint Barnabas, which again I had a lot of fun with that. Yeah, a lot of people think that he was of wealth because he had land. He had a little land on an island, so not in Israel. And but yeah, no, interesting, fascinating stuff. And I even looked up a dish and a drink of the day. So come on, have some fun.
Yeah, have some fun with it. That's pretty interesting. The saint of encouragement.
Yeah. Well, again, Barnabas, that's what it means. It means son of encouragement.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So anyway, he is one of, there's only 14. So if you go like in a saint calendar or whatever, there are only 14 saints that carry the title of apostle, and he is the 14th. He's the last one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you have the original 12, and then you have St. Paul and St. Barnabas.
Now, you said did you say the 72 or 74?
72.
Now, here's my, there's no stupid questions question.
Yeah.
What's that?
When Jesus sends out, some of the people are following him, and Jesus sends them out 2 by 2. He sends out 72. I can't remember. It's in like Luke 10 or something like that. I honestly can't remember the specific reference right offhand. But yeah, it's like he sends them out 2 by 2 to go and proclaim to the towns. And so some people believe that Barnabas was part of that crew.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Okay. I just got it, things that I guess I just never picked up on or never heard or whatever, but interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, again, I did it all tonight. I wanted to make sure I had a restaurant. I have a restaurant, a recipe, and I don't really have like the recipe on hand, but I mean, a dish to make. I got a drink to make. Man, it's just
you
fun.
did it all.
Yeah. That sun is like the idea of like, because they did on the recipe. They're like, hey, son of encouragement. It's encouraging whenever you get the break of dawn kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could also do like, if you're like a younger audience member, if you will, you could do like a sunrise drink, where you put like orange juice, Sunny D, and
there you go.
and you could put like a little bit of grenadine in it. And it kind of has the sunrise effect.
Yeah. That's what we need. We need a book that's for kids, like eating with the saints, drinking with the saints, but it's all, this saint's drink is a Mountain Dew Code Red, or whatever, just something
Honestly,
to get.
That would be awesome. We need that.
It's just supposed to be fun,
Absolutely. It should be fun. I like it. I like it. Anyway, I had a lot of fun writing that earlier today. So
That's a
it's
good one.
is one of the longer ones I've written. So
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a good one. Now, you know what? I just thought about this, which, you know, we don't have to talk about long, but have you seen there's a trend right now? Have you seen any of these AI vlogs of uh Bible I
yes,
shouldn't not characters, but like
yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
you seen those?
They
They're hysterical.
they're good.
They're
Some of them
really
are.
good.
There's some of them are really fun. Like so,
Yeah.
for those of you that do not know what we're talking about, let's I'll be frank. I'll be the first one to admit my daughter sent me one, and it
Oh,
sent me on like
really?
a rabbit trail for a while. And
Yeah,
it's like
they're
and it's like for instance, like all of a sudden you see this like biblical times person, and they're like, "Hey, I'm Jonah. I'm going to try to run from God," and it's like they're holding a selfie phone, like their iPhone,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they flip back on like, okay, so that didn't work. Like I was just vomited on a beach. And it's like it is they're yeah, but they're complete computer generated. But anyway, it's a
It's
lot of fun.
hilarious.
Yeah.
The, there was one that was just Moses walking through like a temple, and he's like, "Hey, yo, this is Moses with my buddy, with my guy Aaron here. We're about to go ask Pharaoh to let our people go. We're going to see how this goes. You know, we'd have no idea." It was like, it's just so good. It
Yeah.
was just, I don't know, they're pretty funny. Anyway, you're just, you know, talk when you're talking about
Yeah.
that I remembered that, and I'm like, I wonder what would be his you know, selfie vlog or whatever. But
I always feel like
yeah,
in a sidecar compared to these
yeah.
two.
All right. Well, I mean, is
All
there
right, now
anything
I'm
else
gonna.
besides our?
I think it's time to move on to you know what, but
Yep.
I might hit the wrong button here, so bear with
Oh,
me.
okay. We'll see.
To our last segment, probably.
All right. Are we ready
Yeah.
for church chatter? Oh, we got
All right, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
I get our little sound effect right there. Anyway, so yeah, it's time for church chatter. So yeah, just trying to think. We actually, honestly, we have quite a few things going on. Right now is VBS. I was actually my voice is a little hoarse because I was the storyteller for VBS tonight.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. I love doing it, but I burned my voice out so quick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I get into it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, doing that. Um, I know on June 22nd, we have the Four on the Floor concert, which is always a good time. And
Oh,
it's one of
yeah.
those things, like I always tell people, like I don't want to missell it, I guess is the way to put it. Like,
Yeah.
it is honestly, it's just a fun concert to go to. I mean, they're not going to look this band, this Four on the Floor, they're not going to, you're not going to leave there going, that is the greatest band of all time, but you're going to have a good time. You're going to have fun.
Yeah.
And that's what it really is. Like the Four on the Floor concert, you're going to have a good time. Them ladies, and I think there's one gentleman that's in it. They're going to play like so many classics. You're going to sing along with it. You're going to stomp your feet. It's a good time. And I think that's about the best way to describe it. Is like, yeah, you're not going to walk out of there going, man, that was the greatest band ever. But you know what you are going to do? You're going to walk out with a smile on your face, going, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so, Four on the Floor concert. Obviously, we do ice cream after that, which is always good, unless you're trying to watch your weight. Anyway, like myself. Anyway, so we have that going on. We also have a new member reception. We got some new members joining our church, and so that's pretty awesome. Got that
Yeah.
on the 22nd as well. And then, boy howdy, we got the youth gathering for me coming up. I'm leaving on July 17th.
Yes.
Leaving for that, coming back on the 24th. In the middle of that, on July 18th, we have our fish fry, which we did last year.
Ooh.
Went over really well. We're doing it again. All you can eat fish fry, but you got to buy a ticket. Get a ticket. So anyway, I think the evangelism committee is going to be the one selling those. So anyway, yeah, there you go. So those are like the big things that are going on. But again, lots and lots going on. Great time.
Yeah.
So what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, we've made a call to a pastor, and he came last Wednesday. I did not get a chance to go meet him, but I heard a lot of positive things, and it sounds like there's there's been a few people who have shown up, that have come and taken a look, and like just in conversation, it seems like, well, doesn't sound like there's a lot of hope of them taking it.
Yeah.
It sounds like their situation, they're probably not, looking for this. But I'll just say there were a few things that he said that it sounds like maybe there's a potential that he would take it. So
Sure.
it's making us kind of excited that hopefully we'll see.
Yeah.
You never tell for sure, but it just sounds like maybe it's a little more hopeful than the last few we've gotten. And then besides that, we're starting up. I started up the VBS band
That's right.
last week or 2 weeks ago, or last week. Yeah.
What's the name? Did you guys choose a name yet?
Now I'll say I think this is super clever. One of the girls who was in it last year came up with this, and I feel bad because I don't want to just say, "Hey guys, we're not going to discuss this any farther because this is, we're just going to do this." But it's really hard to not go with this name, and I'll tell you what it is. But the VBS is True North. Is that the one you're doing?
No, we're
Are you
doing
doing
the Epic Australian Adventure.
Oh, okay. So True North is like I guess kind of in a similar fashion, but this is like Alaskan
Sure.
woodland, like, being like camping sort of idea. And I thought, what are we going to do with that? Like something with trees or something. I don't know. And the girl, she said, what if we did soggy waffles? Because if anybody, if you know your compass directions, or at least how I was taught, I don't know how you were taught. I had a few people who asked, they didn't know what I was saying, but the whole never eat soggy waffles is how you do north, east, south, west.
Gotcha.
And she's like, what if we did soggy waffles? I'm like, that is like an amazing name. I love that name. So we'll see. I mean, I have to like make sure. I want to make sure everybody gets a little bit of a say.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And who knows?
but,
Maybe somebody does have a better idea. Yeah. You never know.
But I mean, I'm already like, that's so perfect. I mean, the logo can be a compass that's also a waffle, and it's like, yeah, I'm like, this is so perfect, So we'll see. It's not confirmed, but I think that's a pretty large contender for the band name at this point.
Oh yeah.
So that's been good. And the band's like doubled in size from last year, so that's really great. And so it's been fun. But that's mostly what we got going on. So we may be having a concert in July.
Okay.
The people who went and saw the Denver Bierman concert at St. John's, he might be coming to Our Savior. We're kind of still we're really early in the process of talking about it and everything, but I think that's what we got confirmed. So it'll be in July. So if anybody's interested, you can keep a lookout for that.
Yeah, as it gets closer, we'll have to bring it up again. So
yeah,
right on. Well, all right then. I think if that's all you have, and then that's all I had. I mean, it's been a good go. So yeah. And again, just to put it out there, I don't know the next time we'll have a chance to record, so it might be a couple weeks. We'll see. Who knows? But it's been great having everybody tonight. So anyway, bye.
Bye.